received 32 Knesset seats, compared to 27 for Netanyahu's Likud party. Another poll found the advantage to be only 31 to 29. When you tally the vote totals for coalitions, one poll had the right leading the center-left 62-58, while the other had the right's advantage at 64-56. If those totals are accurate, Netanyahu would be in a better position to form a new government. Jan Markell is founder and president of Olive Tree Ministries.
I think Benjamin Netanyahu is going to win that election. I think he's getting a press smearing. What's going on with Netanyahu is the same that's going on with Donald Trump. It's a parallel that's almost eerie because it's so similar.
And Markell says Israel has recently been declared the 8th most powerful nation on the earth, at least partly because of Netanyahu's leadership.
They've got a strong military. They've got a strong economy. They're discovering natural resources all over the place that's making them even stronger. And I cannot believe they're going to uninstall Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, stranger things have been known to happen, so it could happen, but I don't think so.
Israelis go to the polls April 9th. I'm Chad Groening.
Was the Nebraska flood and California wildfire evidence of man-made climate change? Governor and presidential candidate Jay Inslee thinks so. Others, not so much.
During a segment last Friday on Fox and Friends, one in which Inslee used to announce he was releasing his tax returns as a way of making a jab at President Trump, a discussion about climate change ensued between Inslee and Fox and Friends host Steve Doocy.
Governor, you look at the Green New Deal and it talks about retrofitting every building in the United States, and that would be really expensive, and getting rid of the internal combustion engine for, you're talking about remaking all of society, and with a price tag of $100 trillion, it's been estimated, we just don't have the money for that, he says.
Well, I'll tell you what's expensive. Expensive is Nebraska being flooded with $1.5 billion of loss. It's Paradise, California, that I went and saw a town of 25,000 burn right to the foundations.
Cal Beisner of the Cornwall Alliance says flooding in Nebraska was not caused by global warming.
There has been no increase in the frequency or intensity of any kind of severe weather events, whether hurricanes or tornadoes or floods or droughts or anything else like that. There has, in fact, been a slight downturn in the hurricanes and tornadoes. There's been no trend in floods and droughts. And when it comes to the wildfires, there's actually a downward trend in the frequency of wildfires from the early 20th century to date.
Beisner feels Inslee also dodged questions about the Green New Deal. I'm Chris Woodward.
A federal court judge will be hearing evidence next week on whether hundreds of Chrysler dealers were wronged by the U.S. Treasury.
About 300 dealers are asking for a total of an estimated $850 million, claiming they were coerced into terminating their franchises during the 2009 auto industry bailout. A trial is scheduled to start on April 8th in the Court of Federal Claims. It's expected to take between 6 and 8 weeks, after which time a judge will rule whether the government coerced Chrysler to terminate 789 of its franchises as a condition of the bailout, or whether Chrysler made the decision on its own. Elisa Z, NBC News Radio.
For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Quarter, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
It is not acceptable that when a woman goes to work or is in any kind of environment that she feels anything less than comfortable and safe. And this is an issue the entire country has got to work on.
I want to protect grand jury testimony, protect classified information, right, but I want the public to see the underlying document. This has been a cloud over President Trump for 2 years. That cloud has been removed.
It's not like you're summarizing something that's really complicated. Do you have sufficient evidence upon which to charge people with conspiracy, collusion, coordination, whatever you want to call it?
I think a lot of Pelosi's poodles out there running scared of the facts, but they're still trying to chase down witch hunts. There was no collusion. Get over that fact. Nobody should have wanted it to happen anyway, but it didn't happen. And yet for 2 years they've been peddling this lie.
And now, Stacy Washington.
I'm back in my own house. I'm back. I'm at home, and as you can tell, I'm pretty happy about it, although guess what, guys? For the first time since 2006, I actually have jet lag. So 2006 is when we took the kids, my husband and I, took them to Germany. And when I got back, I had the worst case of jet lag. And I thought it wouldn't be a big deal for me because I'd done that trip so many times before, but it had been a long break between the last time I was overseas and that trip. And so it knocked me off my feet. And this is no different. Just a 2-hour time zone difference from what my phone calls Cupertino time and Central time. And I have just been dragging along. So I am so happy to be back behind the mic in the little home studio, the Stacy on the Right show. It's a tiny room. It's in our house, but I'm so glad to be here. And we have a great show for you today. We're going to chat with Nicholas Grossman. He's a professor at the University of Illinois. And the reason we love all of our guests here at the show. And we're always so blessed to have people come on and join us because people are busy. And if they've written books or they've been on Fox News or any place big, it's not easy to get them to come on the show. So Professor Grossman is really amazing because he's going to bring us some very important analysis on the Mueller report. And I want to hear what he has to say because the big deal now is everybody wants to see the 400-page Mueller report. Like they're going to learn something from it that the summary didn't impart. And I think it's especially telling that the majority of the people who are screaming and getting all stompy foot about it, they're upset because they think that in the 400 pages is something that proves that President Trump is guilty of the thing that the summary says he's not guilty of. Knowing full well that A.G. Barr would lose all of his credibility, he would jeopardize his position if he said anything that was the opposite of what the report contained. And remember, how did they get that done? How did he get the 400-page report done? Well, I mean, let's just guess, throw out a couple of wise guesses. Well, he could have had portions of it given to him beforehand because of the position that he's in. He's the Attorney General, and Mueller is, this acting special prosecutor, not acting. And so he could have had portions of it that he was privy to. He could have gotten the report and done what so many members of Congress do. They put a bunch of what they call, it's not a technical term like slaves. It's like literally people who just drone out work when you order them to. They put a bunch of people in a room. Each person takes 10 pages of the report. They read those 10 pages and they summarize it. They highlight anything that's super important that the person who's ultimately going to write the summary needs to see. And so the person, A.G. Barr, would read all of the highlighted portions and the summaries and take a report that's 400 pages down to about 20 or 30 or even 40 pages. See, that's one way he could have gotten it done. In any case, there's no way he would get caught, which is what will happen if the report is released and it has anything contrary to what his summary said, then he loses all credibility. So there's zero reason for any American to think that the report is going to shine some light or have some smoking gun in it that A.G. Barr didn't see, missed, was too lazy to read, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just not going to happen. So this is going to be an interesting interview when he gets on today. We're also going to talk about whether or not private property is racist. This is the latest effort by the Democrats to try to paint something as simple as saving money, making wise choices with your credit, getting married instead of cranking out a bunch of kids and going on welfare, and then going out and getting a loan and buying a home. Millions and millions of blacks, whites, Asians, mixed background people, immigrants, foreigners, millions of people of every stripe do this every single year. Home ownership in America is tied. It's inextricably linked to wealth attainment and the stability of our country's economic situation. But is it racist? I think you guys know what I'm going to say to that. I mean, I just have to hold back the laughter when I first saw that this is where they're going with this. The group that has all the failed policies also thinks that they can make everyone think that simply owning a dwelling, that's racist. You can't make this stuff up. So anyway, we're going to talk about that in the third segment. Also, that Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson, Dr. Carson, was in St. Louis. I believe it was, I'm not sure if it was Saturday or if it was Friday. Remember, I was like, just trying desperately to get back here from California on Friday evening. And I don't know how I missed the press release or whatever that he was going to be here, but he was here. And so we have a little bit of audio of him discussing a new program that they're developing to help spur investment into declining neighborhoods. Now, I'm going to withhold judgment. I think Dr. Carson is brilliant, and I think if he's going to bring forward a new program, it's something that's going to get the government out of the way and unleash the private sector to, increase development in areas that are now economically depressed. But let's see, and I want to hear what you think about it as well. We are also going to talk about the Democrats' decision. They've decided, it's official, to push handsy old Uncle Joe out to pasture. He still thinks he's relevant and that he has a place with the Democrats in leadership, and they feel like he's had a storied history and he's been awesome and he just should go on to that good night because he's done. And no one's told him. No one's actually sat him down and said, hey, Joe, you know who has to do it, his best friend, Barack Obama, but no one's done it yet. So we'll talk about that as well. Right now, I want to launch into our encouragement. So this to me is really relevant because I have, as I sometimes will put on social media, I got stuff I'm dealing with. And what we do is, obviously, we want to pray. We want to have a relationship with our Father in heaven. We want to be in prayer. In other words, a constant conversation with him on a daily basis. But there's something more that you can do. And God's word actually describes this to us, and it lets us know, hey, you know what, people, you know what you can do? You can get together, and 2 or 3 of you, you can get together in agreement, and you can pray, and it will move me. I will move on your behalf. And so this is for healing. It's for any situation. So the scripture that I'm talking about is Matthew 18:19. It says, if 2 of you on earth agree about anything you ask for, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. Let me read another version of this, because this is on one of my little prayer cards, but I found another version for you. Again, I say to you that if 2 of you agree on earth concerning anything that they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them. So this is also known commonly as the power of agreement. And it's something really important because it's in the scripture. Agree on earth concerning anything that they ask. So you have to find someone who's in perfect agreement with you that God can heal you, that he will heal you, and that you want to be healed. That person wants you to be healed, and that the healing is possible, that it is available to you, which all things are possible in Christ. And then you have to remind yourself, God doesn't need to be reminded, but you have to remind yourself that where 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, he's there in the midst. So that's the power of praying together. Now, sometimes what happens with us is we have so much doubt going on. We are listening to the natural, which it may have been a doctor saying, look, this isn't something we can do anything with. Or it may be just you looking at the situation and in your natural mind surmising this is not something that can be fixed. Or it could be that you doubt it because maybe you got to no to the last thing you prayed about, you feel like the Lord said no. And so you're like, he's maybe not going to do this either. Or you have a wrong view of God, which all of us sometimes struggle with this, where we don't believe that God is happy with us, or that he's, that he wants to do things for us because, we've made mistakes, we've sinned, we've failed at things. Those things aren't true. And that's a trick of the enemy. He wants to steal your faith and keep you from relying on God, from trusting him, from believing that he'll do what you ask, because that's how he can get you to, in other words, it's a negative spiral. You'll be believing less that God can do for you. And in turn, you'll be experiencing less answered prayer, and in turn thinking God doesn't answer prayer. And so that's a vicious cycle to get into. And the enemy would love for you to be there. God wants you to be here, right here in this scripture, where he says, 2 of you gather in agreement, 2 or more, you pray, you ask, I move. It's sometimes that you think it has to be intense, that it has to be this like major, massive, like, sky cracking open, lightning and all that stuff. And, hey, if when that happens when you pray, amen to that. But God also answers our prayers when we're just, you're just broken down. You barely have enough energy to pray. and you gather together with another person and you say, we're in agreement on this, and you pray about the issue, God hears those prayers too. So don't feel like you have to be, up on the mountaintop and, that everything in the world has to pause for a second. And then by the enormity or the intensity of your prayer, prayer is prayer. Keep doing it. It doesn't have to feel amazing for it to be effective. So God wants more than anything for you to have a relationship with him. He wants a relationship with you. And so if there's anything that you're in agreement with, that you're praying for, the verse doesn't say unless you just sinned, yesterday, or unless you feel condemned, or unless, it doesn't have any of those things, no caveats. So your encouragement today is you can pray by yourself. Obviously, you must do that. But when the problem seems insurmountable, or when you're wanting that extra jolt, because oftentimes I find what encourages me is the praying with another person. It actually encourages me, as opposed to it doing something for them. I'm encouraged by it, which then spurs me on to more prayer, more study, more reflection, which is always good for the individual, the person who's in need. So don't give up on that. God's word is true. He doesn't lie. He doesn't put little addendums on there. His word is whole and complete, and it's for you. And prayer is for you, and answered prayer is for you. So the Bible verse is Matthew 18:19. Again, I say to you that if two of you agree on earth concerning anything that they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. Where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them. And that's totally encouraging. Okay, so I have a little bit of audio for you, but we also have a caller. So let's go to, let's go to the phones. We have Ernest in Michigan. Hey, Ernest, thanks for calling the show today.
Hey, Stacy, how are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
Good. I just want to say I agree with everything you just said. There's a old song by the group Commission, and it's stated that Jesus cares about our everyday struggles, and he really does. Mm-hmm. And I also want to comment on the fact that you had made a statement after they found there was no collusion, it was all delusion. I was watching CNN, and boy, some of the long faces of the panel, they just looked like they had lost us. Like they was looking like sick puppies. They just need to get over it. Just get over it.
They're not going to, but they do. They need to.
Yeah. And I watched, Donald Trump was in Michigan, and I watched some of his speech on YouTube, and he's done a lot. God has blessed him to do a lot for this country. I'm going to say this, and I'm going to go. I believe God has placed Donald Trump in place so that prophecy can be fulfilled. A lot of people don't understand that because they don't understand the Bible. I just want to say to you, Stacy, you're doing a fantastic job. You are a blessing to the body of Christ, and keep on doing what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I want to just kind of piggyback on what Ernest is saying. And remember, God places the leaders in authority over us. And so as disappointing as it can be for, I'm speaking to the listeners in our audience who are not Trump supporters, but, they still listen. God bless you. It can be disappointing for you when you feel like, how can God use Donald Trump? He's coarse, he's this, he's that. He's been married more than one time. He wasn't a true Christian, blah, blah, blah. I've heard all the criticisms. I understand where they come from. But conversely, you were excited when President Obama was in office. And those of us who we're Christians too, we are definitely, Bible-believing Christians. I felt like Barack Obama was a judgment on this nation. So, we have to keep it in context, if you will, or perspective. We have to keep our perspective that what looks one way to one of us can look another way to another of us, but God's will is going to be done on this earth. It's going to be done. Whether it's Trump or Obama or whoever, he's going to use the leader. He's going to turn their head whichever way he wants it to go. So when we get back, we're going to have Professor Grossman. Hold on.
It's amazing but true. When it comes to one of America's biggest household expenditures, healthcare, a lot of people think they've got no choice. People are used to thinking we have to do it this way, but they don't. Yes, you have the freedom to choose an alternative with your healthcare. It's MediShare, and it costs way less than the alternatives. The typical family saves $500 a month, not a year, a month. And if you're single, this can save you a lot too. And let's face it, a big reason MediShare is 400,000 people strong, it just works. They've shared over $3 billion in medical bills, so they can help share your needs too. Joining MediShare for so many people is one of those things that makes you say, Why didn't I do this before? So yes, the time has come for something better. Look into joining MetaShare and see why so many people are opting out of the old way and into the new. Why not look into this? Just call 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. A number of years ago, our youngest son called me and asked, "Dad, is America a Christian nation?" I said, that's not an easy question to answer. It all depends on what you mean by Christian nation. For example, if you mean that our country was built on certain Christian principles, then the answer is a resounding yes. But if you mean that all our leaders have had a relationship with Christ and lived and governed by biblical principles and values, well, obviously the answer is no. Let's face it, the hand and favor of God definitely have been on this country. But it doesn't take long to see that sin and evil have also been a part of our history and development. There's a word for us in Psalm 33, verses 10 through 12. The Lord nullifies the counsel of the nations. He frustrates the plans of the peoples. The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart from one generation to the next. Then that great opening line of verse 12. Blessed is a nation whose God is the Lord. I want to make 3 quick observations. Number 1, our plans as a nation apart from God are meaningless. Apart from God, what we intend to do will not bear eternal fruit. Second, God's plans are eternal. His counsel, his direction, his insight are eternal. The third observation is obvious. God's favor is released through surrender to his lordship. That expression, blessed, means full, complete, happy is the nation, content is the nation whose God is the Lord. Well, here's what I want you to remember and do today. Let's pray for genuine revival to sweep across our country. Let's ask God to bring our leaders to him and to use them to accomplish his purposes.
Join Crawford Loritz tomorrow for another Legacy Moment.
This is Stacy on the Right with Stacy Washington on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey there, welcome back to the program. If you want to know more about what we're doing here, go to afr.net and urbanfamilytalk.com. We are so glad to have with us our next guest on the program. It's Professor Nicholas Grossman. He is the professor of international relations at the University of Illinois, frequent guest on the program, and we're so glad to have you today here. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Stacy. Thanks for having me on.
Hi. Okay, so let's talk about the Mueller report. You've got a little bit of analysis going on here on whether or not Americans should see the Mueller report. I personally am not planning on reading all 400 pages, but I guess if they issue it, I'll find it on Scribd somewhere and read a couple of pages. But I don't need to read the whole thing. Should we even have access to it?
Well, I think so, and I'll admit I probably won't read all 400 either. But I'm very interested in seeing it. I think there's some information that will be redacted because it's protecting sources and methods of intelligence gathering. Anything that's affecting any ongoing investigations, they need to keep hidden. And any information that would smear somebody who is not being charged with a crime, especially somebody who's not a public official, that they should redact to protect those people's privacy. But otherwise, I think it's really important for, if nothing else, being part of the historical record and also to answer foreign policy and national security questions pertaining to Russia's activities specifically. It also could give us a good way to agree on a set of facts as a country and hopefully turn the page from various squabbles over the 2016 election.
So I kind of agree with you on releasing it, mainly because releasing the report enables the so the naysayers will say, if we don't release it, or if it's not released, I have nothing to do with it. If it's not released, the naysayers will say, well, they're hiding something. So if it's released, then the information is out there and there can no longer be these kind of statements about how there's something hidden inside that's being withheld. But then don't you feel like there's a possibility of people twisting the words in the report, as we see a lot with mainstream media? They don't acknowledge the whole truth, or they just cherry pick, and then they use that in a repetitive fashion to drum these false things into the minds of Americans who kind of just get a little news here and there?
I think that's a safe bet, but I think they're going to do it either way. That, as you note, as long as it stays hidden, people will say that they're covering something up. And you know what? Even after it's released, I'm sure somebody will say, oh, there's something that is still covered up. Can't you see? Take a look at this. And there will be people who don't like the president and will cherry pick out something to say, oh, look, this proves that everything's terrible. And there'll be people who do like the president who will cherry pick something also. What I think, though, since they're going to do it anyway, is that this is more about the rest of us. Is anybody who is going to be objective, who is going to look at evidence, and not only now, but any historians looking back in the future. And so while some people will definitely try to make political hay over it one way or another, I'm pretty optimistic that enough people will be swayed more by evidence than by people trying to manipulate evidence. And so for that reason, I lean more towards giving people the facts and letting them judge based on the facts, as opposed to basing on what people are saying in terms of speculation about what the facts may be.
So I'm interested to get your take on something that's it's kind of percolating under the surface, if you will, pertaining to the Mueller investigation and the report, which is, while the report clears the president and his entire campaign apparatus of ever colluding or accepting help from or being involved with the Russians in an attempt to influence the election, there was this refusal to say that the president didn't obstruct justice, which, I mean, if he obstructed justice, it would have been that he fired Mueller, that he denied him resources or access to certain people or events. The only thing I could think of that he said no to that was significant was he wouldn't sit down with Mueller, which his attorneys told him not to, because it was an opportunity for Mueller to entrap him, as he did so many of the other witnesses who were tried and convicted on things that had nothing to do with collusion. So what is this idea that Mueller says he found evidence of obstruction, but not enough to prosecute?
So I think a lot of that comes down to a blurring of what's actually a really important distinction between a criminal charge of obstruction of justice and a impeachable charge of obstruction of justice. So a criminal charge would be the president broke the law, and the attorney general has put forward an argument that I think is pretty convincing, that the president cannot break the law if he is doing something within his constitutional powers, even if he is doing something for a reason that you don't agree with. So in this case, there's suspicion that Trump may have obstructed justice in asking FBI Director James Comey to go easy on Michael Flynn. He might have obstructed justice in firing Comey. And what Barr's argument is that those are things that the president is constitutionally allowed to do. So even if you don't like the reasons for it, it's still not illegal. However, the question of impeachment is one of abuse of power. It's in Article 2 of the Constitution that gives the president his powers. There's a clause that says the president has to take care to faithfully execute the laws. And so what that means is Congress can determine, if it wants to, that the president did something that is technically legal, but is not a faithful execution of the laws and is therefore an abuse of power. And that's what Congress did with both Richard Nixon and Bill Clinton. In both cases, they were accused of obstruction of justice. It passed as impeachment for Nixon. It was through the Judiciary Committee, and before it got to the full House, he resigned. For Clinton, it passed through the committee and also through the full House. And in both cases, they were then impeached for obstruction of justice, but neither had been charged with a crime. So those are two separate things, and it's one for, in that case, Congress to decide. But the Attorney General has concluded, or he says that Mueller has concluded, and I believe him, that there is not enough for a criminal charge.
So in lay people speak, he did a little bit of obstructing. I mean, I'm not getting, it's almost as if Mueller, who has this so-called impeccable record, and he's just so, Mueller's just this above reproach dude. At least he was until the Mueller report summary came out by A.G. Barr. Now, all of a sudden, he's suspect again, but this is the fickle, wishy-washy nature of the Democrats supporting almost anything. But it's almost like a parting shot against the president for him to put that in the report.
I interpreted it almost the opposite way, where I took this as a really positive thing for Mueller, in that the special counsel's job is not to determine something like abuse of power and obstruction of justice. That is up to the Attorney General for the legal question, and up to Congress for the political question. And so I interpreted that line of saying, I'm not bringing charges, but I'm not exonerating him either, as saying, I'm going to do just the facts. Here's the evidence. It's your job to make a judgment call, not mine. Now, granted, neither of us has seen the report, so it's possible that there's more editorializing or where it seems like Mueller kind of has an opinion, even if he doesn't come out and say it. But that I can't know to see the report. That's another reason why I'd like to see it. But I think that them saying, we're not going to make this decision, we're just going to give you the facts and other people can make that determination, is the right move. And I have more respect for that. I would have had less respect if he tried to make what amounted to a political judgment.
Okay. Well, and that's why I love having you on to talk, because I certainly wasn't feeling that way. I noticed that people immediately pounced on that in the media, and they've been saying, well, because he said he couldn't exonerate him of it, it means he's guilty of it, which I think is a reach.
Yeah, that's not how it works. But most people who are found not guilty are also not exonerated. So not exonerated means proves that you didn't do it. So something like if you're charged with murder and you have this really great alibi that you were in another country and you're on video and stuff, and you couldn't have done the murder, you're exonerated. Or, DNA testing can exonerate people. But most of the time, the way that the justice system works is you're innocent until proven guilty. And if you're not proven guilty, even if you're not exonerated, you're still not guilty. And so I think there's an immense amount of room between not being charged and exonerated. And we can't know how close it is to either. It could be that there's a tiny bit of evidence that someone who really hates the president could spin into an obstruction charge. Or it could be that there's a lot of evidence that just falls short of provable beyond a reasonable doubt, or anything in between. And we don't know without seeing the report itself.
I think that's a great point to make. So when someone is accused of a crime and they are found not guilty, it's different than, because the description you just gave is you've not been proven that you didn't do it. They just couldn't prove you did it without a shadow of a doubt. That's a distinction.
Right, and it's an important one. It's the basis of innocent until proven guilty. The opposite is that we presume your guilt and you have to prove your innocence, which sometimes can be impossible.
Indeed. In fact, it can be impossible. And now, in today's world where we're catching all of our metadata and maybe less so, but still it is possible to be out in the woods,
right,
on a hike or a cabin, you stand in a cabin by yourself for reflection and have no witnesses and be accused of something and then be unable to prove that you weren't there and them not able to prove that you were there, and therefore some suspicion remains, but you are not proven guilty, therefore you're innocent. There's a lot more thinking that goes into what you're describing here than simply reading the report and saying he didn't exonerate him, therefore he must be guilty, which is exactly what I'm hearing over and over and over again. It's actually being used as a justification for mining the Mueller report and looking for nuggets of guilt that can then be strung together to prove that he was indeed guilty, even though Mueller says he wasn't.
And that's why I think this isn't going to give the sort of closure that maybe I hoped, of where it looks like Mueller's report is going to present some evidence that some people can argue is abuse of power or is obstruction of justice, or is something that looks kind of like collusion, and other people will be able to argue that it's none of those things. It's more that the report shows exonerating, and we're probably going to end up in not much of a different position than we are now, except that thankfully we'll have more facts to base it on. But I'm sure that there will always be people who are going to try to spin it one way or another, that they had made up their minds before Mueller finished it all, and nothing that Mueller does is going to change their minds. But I like to think that those are a relatively small minority of people. I mean, they're very loud. They're loud in the media. They're loud on Twitter. But still, they don't seem to be overall the impression of the public.
So it's pretty, like I've seen some polls that have come out, snap polls that they did right after the Mueller report was released, and Democrats tend to think overwhelmingly that the report is wrong and something's wrong with it. It's not correct. And Republicans tend to think that although they didn't really like the Mueller investigation, that the report is correct. So it really is a partisan contest if you're asking people whether or not they believe it. I've also seen some people referring back to the Benghazi investigation and the Hillary Clinton email investigation, which she was exonerated, but now we've come to find out a lot of details about how that happened that show that she was never really ever going to be convicted of anything because they'd already, predetermined her innocence regardless of what they found. Are those things comparable? Can someone say to me, hey, you know what? I don't believe the Mueller report because you Republicans never believed the Benghazi investigation or the Hillary Clinton email investigation. Do you see, a reason for people to use those to bludgeon anyone who believes the Mueller report over the head with their disbelief? Or
I think the part that's most similar, especially with the Hillary email investigation, is that Comey said they're not going to charge her, but also he didn't exonerate her. He said that she, made some serious mistakes or a serious carelessness. And similarly with Barr quoting Mueller, also saying, we're not going to charge, but we're also not saying totally exonerated. So that part I think is fairly similar. And maybe this is strange in today's partisan environment, but I'm somebody who trusts the evidence in all of these investigations. I trust the conclusion of them, that people, especially people who are not political, who are, say, working as Justice Department lawyers, do their best to make a political decision under the law. And I know that obviously some people are biased, but try to make the best decision that they can under the law. And I buy that not charging Hillary was the correct prosecutorial decision. And I buy that not charging Trump or anybody from his campaign or, say, his sons or son-in-law was also the correct prosecutorial decision. That's a different question of the part about, say, was the investigation itself motivated by politics? And the answer is at least partially yes. But I think that the investigators did a pretty thorough job, as best I can tell, and were able to act without too much political pressure, without being too biased. And even seeing the Republican reaction now of, well, I had questions about the investigation, but it looks like, they did it above board, that my fears were not realized. I mean, I think that's a very positive outcome. And I hope that when Democrats see the final report, that they will react also, that, even if it doesn't fit exactly what conclusion they wanted to going in, I hope at least some of them will treat it with the respect that it deserves, with what they were saying in advance that it deserves, only to then maybe see that it didn't reach the conclusion they want before changing their mind.
I hope so too. I hope you're right about that. So what I've been watching is I tried, because it kind of enrages me, so I can't go full Monty where I'm just watching hours and hours of it, but I definitely have checked in on the major networks, MSNBC, CNN, and what I'm seeing is doubling down. Jake Tapper said that, look, we didn't do anything wrong in our reporting. Well, this is 2016 election part 2. They got the 2016 election wrong by a lot. It wasn't a slight error. They predicted Hillary Clinton would win by a landslide and that Donald Trump would barely even tap into the Electoral College, and instead he won handily. And now they have been predicting for 2 years that he would be impeached or removed from office or resign because of collusion, and he's been found not to have colluded. I hope you're right. You're so much more even keeled than these monsters on cable. It's a pleasure to chat with you, Professor Nicholas Grossman of University of Illinois. Thank you for all that common sense. It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure.
Talk to you again soon. We will be back with your calls at 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037 right after this.
This is Uncommon Moments. Here's former Super Bowl winning NFL coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren sharing from their book Uncommon Marriage.
Having your wife help you grow as a husband is really valuable. Sometimes I get too focused on the what ifs, and Lauren shows me not to worry. I'm a better dad and a better husband because of her wisdom. What you don't want to do is say to yourself, I wish my spouse was more like me. I shouldn't think that about my wife or my children or anyone. Instead, we're a team.
Our differences are one reason God brought us together, and we make good decisions when we work through things as husband and wife. I think my perspective helps Tony look at things differently for the better. Together we trust the Lord, knowing He will work all things out.
Tony and Lauren Dungy, authors of Uncommon Marriage, learning about lasting love and overcoming life's obstacles together. Discover more at CoachDungy.com.
There are many ways you can listen to the shows of Urban Family Talk. One of those ways is through our very own app. Whether you have an iPhone or an Android, just go to the App Store and search for Urban Family Talk. You'll have immediate access to 24-hour programming as well as the podcast for each show. You'll be able to tune in no matter where you are. Speaking of tuning in, we have our own channel on another radio app called Tune In. Cool, right? Urban Family Talk is everywhere. Just download the app and take us wherever you go.
The Christian life is a battle. A wise soldier puts on the whole armor of God so that he is able to stand against the wicked schemes of the devil.
We can have victory over the enemy when we go into the battle, not dependent on our strength, but dependent on the strength of Almighty God.
The Hour of Intercession with Joseph Parker, weekday afternoons at 1 Central on Urban Family Talk.
Donald Trump's America.
President Trump says if the flow of illegal immigrants into the U.S. doesn't come to a stop, he'll take steps to close the southern border. White House Counselor Kellyanne Conway on Fox News Sunday says numbers they have show
4,000 migrants apprehended in one day recently. We're on track this month for close to 100,000. We have never seen a surge like this.
The president is also cutting aid to key Central American nations to prompt them to curb illegal immigration. Also, it may be mid-April before Congress sees a redacted Mueller report. House Intel Committee member Jim Himes, a Democrat, says Congress would like it sooner.
My guess is that this is going to be something that can be negotiated away so that we wind up, as everybody agrees we should, with the Mueller report.
Himes says while Republicans feel the report will show no collusion with Russia, he feels the report will also show reasons why many people thought there was within its more than 300 pages. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Lots of balloons and big signs welcome Housing and Urban Development Secretary Dr. Ben Carson and Missouri Governor Mike Parson to the North Sarah Apartments. St. Louis Mayor Lyda Krewson and Congressman Lacey Clay also took part in a roundtable discussion.
What's been done here in St. Louis, I think, is a tremendous model.
Politicians listened to many people, including 3 women, who talked about how government programs help turn their lives around.
I was able to get a great job and do what I love to do, which is teach, and move out of public housing.
Secretary Carson was here to promote a new program for neighborhoods in decline that rewards investors with tax breaks if they build new homes or businesses and continue to invest in those properties for as long as 10 years instead of taking the profits and leaving town.
That was the model. Before you'd come in, you reap your benefits and you take off. Here today, gone tomorrow. We're looking at a here today and here to stay model.
At the end of the day, it's about trying to give people an opportunity to go back into the workforce, be productive citizens.
The secretary also had these thoughts concerning segregation and homeowners.
We still have a lot of segregation, but that segregation is principally caused by the fact that people can't afford to be somewhere else. We have to fight the affordability problem.
Rules for this new program
are still being drawn up. In North City, Rocky Madden, News 11.
Okay, so it's a good news story in that he's saying that the government will incentivize long-term development in socioeconomically depressed areas. And I'm kind of, it's a mixed bag for sure, because anytime we give the government permission to start saying, you know, if you develop here, we'll give you tax breaks, there's a danger there. There's a danger that that could go in a direction that we don't want it to go in, or that it could result in a very rapid form of gentrification, which you still have the same people who need somewhere to live, but now they've been moved out of their area where they were into another area, so that the economic depression remains. I'm hoping that what we're going to see as a part of what he's doing is some of the same thing that it kind of undergirds everything that Dr. Carson does, which is he came from, his mom was a maid, and his father wasn't in the home, and he and his brother grew up thinking that their mom was this huge reader because she pretended to read the newspaper every day to encourage them, to set the example for them to be readers. She put their multiplication tables on an audio cassette tape for them to listen to for 30 minutes before they went to bed. And as they drifted off to sleep, they'd be hearing their multiplication tables. And so they learned not to fear math. They used to have to read books over the summer and give her book reports, which she never read because she couldn't read. They didn't find out she couldn't read until they were almost adults. But by then, it was too late. Her deception had worked. Her motherly, she was crafty. She made it work for her sons because she wanted them to have something more. And part of the inspiration for that was the man that she cleaned for was a professor and a very well-educated man. He had a home full of books, and he was very kind to her and stressed the importance of education. Knowing that she couldn't read, he fostered and facilitated the things that she did with her sons by reinforcing the idea that her sons could not only read but write reports and be well-educated and go on to have stellar careers and do big things. That is something amazing. And it's a great story. And so that undergirds all of the things that he's doing to promote changes that can be made. And, full disclosure, we live in a tiny little suburb on the outside of St. Louis. We made it here through, honestly, the grace of God and a lot of good decisions. And we made mistakes along the way, but in the end, everything that we did was geared towards, because we lived in the city. We had, a multi-unit apartment building that we lived in while we were in the city. And we had renters, and we lived in a neighborhood that was very mixed. So there were Section 8 rentals in the neighborhood, and there were also, really expensive homes that had been remodeled by people who moved into the city from the suburbs. And so in the midst of all of that, we kind of got it in our heads, we could turn this into a vehicle for us to get a home in the suburbs if we decide we want to put the kids in public school, which is eventually what we did. But it wasn't racism that got us there, and it wasn't racism that could keep us from getting there. We live in a neighborhood that it's largely white. I mean, over 90%, probably over 95% for the town that we live in. And then we're in a part of the county that is largely white because St. Louis is very segregated. But it's not segregated because people can't, some of it is people can't move out of the city. But for people in the suburbs, they choose to live in areas where they can get the kind of house that they want. So the question is private property racist? If you listen to, so Dr. Ben Carson, in case you've never heard of him before, he's a permanently tanned individual. So, someone who came up by his bootstraps. He's a Christian. He believes that God gives you, what you get from God, but you still have to work hard and you have to make right choices. So how was he able to achieve the pinnacle of success and be the head of Johns Hopkins Medical Center and do all of these amazing surgeries and have this amazing career as a neurosurgeon? How was he able to do that if he's permanently tanned and America is this horribly racist country? Well, one of those things has to not be true, right? So let's look at this tack. And this is something that it's enraging, but we have to understand where this comes from. When you peddle ideas that are failed, your only option after your ideas fail yet again is to find someone to blame the failure on and to pin it on that person using something that's like a bulletproof, arrow, which is racism. And that is the tool that the left employs so many times. If they can take someone who's innocent, who's just out somewhere living and happens not to be permanently tanned, but is doing well for themselves, and if they can say that person is only doing well because of racism, then they can achieve a lot of different things with one shot. You've demonized a whole group of people. They now have the blame and the shame hanging around their necks for just making right choices and living right. Because remember, that's generational. When you decide to make right choices for yourself and you get married and you follow God's plan and God blesses you, that blessing overflows and runs over to the kids. Now, it's not that the kids can do anything they want and still walk in the blessings. No, the kids have to make right choices too. But you can see where after a few generations, and I'm talking about just from, let's say just take a family that started in 1980. The two met in 1980 and got married, and now they've been married because it's 2019. They've been married for a while. Now they've got kids and some grandkids, and if the kids were obedient and lived well, they're probably pretty, I won't say prosperous, but doing well. That is not racism. So making right choices isn't racism. It is racism to say that a whole group of people that are socioeconomically disadvantaged are disadvantaged purely due to racism and them being permanent victims, and that there's nothing that can help them but to go out and find people who have made right choices and take what they have. Like, for instance, you know, any couple you find living out here where I live, just randomly pick a couple. They might even be Democrats. Just pick them and tell them you guys are only successful because you're racist. Is that the America we want to morph into? After all of the years of slavery and segregation and then the civil rights movement and coming from there to here and walking in the blessing of knowing that God has reconciled us all to each other, and the knowledge that we have due to technology and DNA that Americans are an individual people group and that white and black Americans are more closely related than, say, me and some Nigerian person. God bless. I'm all for Nigerians, but I'm saying I'm not more closely related to a Nigerian person who shares the same skin color that I have than I am to a white American whose family has been here since the slave era. So you can't beat those genes. You can't beat that history. You can't beat that people group, right? So is property racist? Now, the Democrats have been peddling this garbage since this one article I found was from 2014. And I read a few of them to try to, kind of get ready to talk about this, because I just want to understand what is going on with these people. Well, they say that the police are racist and the police are an appendage of the larger institution of property. Police serve property, and property in the United States, at the very least, is inextricable from racist dispositions of wealth. Therefore, property is racist. Now, I know for some of you, your heads just exploded. You're like, whoa, you said don't swerve, keep it 10 and 2. Do not, nick the car next to you as you're driving along, because you might be thinking to yourself, what did she just say? That's what I just read over here at counterpunch.org. And this is not the only article of this nature. This person says it's no coincidence that the term private, found in the designation private property, derives from the verb to deprive. And these deprivations from the late 18th century on, and the creation of personal property, slaves for instance, and real property, which is land, were justified and enabled by racist ideologies. This relationship between race, property, and police appears in the very creation of the institution of the police department. Now, I can go on further. This piece really, the whole idea that property is racist is a part of what they're trying to do. That what they really want to do is take anyone who reads this and flip a switch in their mind to turn them against the police. The same police who, when you dial 911, they show up. They don't ask you, are you a property owner, before they come to you. They don't ask you, are you black? Because we can't respond to you if you're black. They come if you dial 911, regardless of who you are, and they respond. But there's something bigger here. Why would any person who's on the left need to go to these great lengths to look up how police departments were originally formed and try to create this narrative that the police are racist and therefore property is racist? Well, because these people want to eliminate private property, they think the government should own it all. And when the government owns all of the property, you have someone like Nicolas Maduro, it would be an American, of course, who would be able to deprive you of your right to your home, give that home to someone else, give it to a group of someone else's, or take it for themselves, and there'd be nothing you could do about it, because your inalienable rights, the rights that are given to you by the Creator, that are enshrined and protected in the Constitution, all of that would be a bunch of hooey. You wouldn't have to worry about that anymore. You wouldn't have to worry about owning guns or property or cars. You wouldn't own anything. Everything would be an extension of the state. That always leads to people being killed, because at some point, all of these really good-natured liberals that are the ones who are actually supporting these people, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, because people like to act like these new people are the fringe and they're something new, and they're aberrations. They are the creations of Nancy Pelosi and Dick Durbin and Barack Obama. These are they're their fruit. You know, what happens when you create something, that thing grows and it produces after its own kind. These new Democrats can't be that different from the old Democrats, because we each produce after our own kind. Okay? So don't miss this. Every time you hear someone talking about this thing, you could take anything, this polka dotted mug is racist. At some point, that racist thing has to be punished, and its owner has to be punished by extension, because you believe you're drinking out of the mug, you believe in it. Everything falls under this ideology. They can't fix inner cities because they keep applying Marxist communist principles to people who live in the inner city, and it's not working. So what do they want to do? They want to improve the inner city by basically taking it and dissipating it out into the successful areas by eliminating private property and the right to say, as a town, all of our lots in this town are 1 acre, and all of the new construction shall be single property, single family dwellings. And they want the government to come in and say, you shall not only have single family dwellings, you shall have 100 unit apartment buildings 10 stories tall in your neighborhoods as well. We don't care if that destroys the peace and tranquility. We don't care if everybody in your neighborhood then puts up a for sale sign and moves to another town. What we're going to do is we're going to make you live the way we want you to live, which when you hear that, you know that's unconstitutional. It goes against what the founders had for us. And it irrelevant of whether you think it's racist or not racist, it is done to cover up failure. The failure of individuals who honestly, they couldn't find a good idea. If a good idea was a person and walked up to them and cold clocked them in the face, they would still, upon waking up, not know who punched them because the person who punched them was a good idea. And that's what we're dealing with here. And so when you hear it, just automatically go to, why is private property racist? And how did you come to that place? Are you saying it's racist because people who tend to own private property tend to have wealth and they tend to make good choices and they tend to be in certain family situations, two parent households, one or two incomes, but two income households, intact marriages, children all from the same couple, most children from the same couple, right? Once they've frozen their target and stuck it up there and then slapped the label racist on it, they can do almost anything to that entity. And when we hear someone say that's racist, the first thing you have to do is figure out, okay, why would this person say this thing is racist? And then ask them what's racist about it. What exact example do you have of this entity or person or group of people being racist? Provide documentation of each racist act and tell me, how many times does someone have to be racially insensitive for that to rise to the level of racism? And what is your definition of racism? I guarantee you before you get to that last question, that person will have devolved and melted down. They'll be calling you names, they'll be in your face spitting, or they'll have disconnected from you if it's online because they can't answer those questions. As Christians, we have to be as gentle as doves, but we have to be strong as steel. And the steel is the truth of God. We have to be really careful when we begin to accept these ideas. They're rooted in lies and falsehoods, and they're meant to take away our rights that are given to us by God. All right. That is the show. You have news and information from onenewsnow.com if you're sticking around. And if you're leaving us now, citizens, good evening from the Heartland. Until tomorrow.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
The sexual revolution is falsely promised to satisfy the human heart.
God has a better way if we follow God's prescription.
Dr. Michael Brown offers hope for those trapped in the downward spiral of sexual immorality. The Freedom of Sexual Purity is a powerful DVD from the AFA Cultural Institute. Get your copy today at afastore.net.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. British lawmakers are considering 4 alternatives to Prime Minister Theresa May's rejected Brexit deal in hopes of finding a plan that can command majority support. The options up for vote in Parliament include 2 proposals that aim to retain close economic ties between Britain and the European Union. Another option wants any Brexit deal to be submitted to a public referendum, And the fourth says Britain should cancel Brexit if it comes within 2 days of crashing out with no deal. Ceasefire talks continue between Israelis and Arabs a week after a conflict, a day of demonstrations, and a region preparing for the possibility of war. Fox's Trey Yingst reports from Jerusalem.
Monday, the leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, met with representatives from the United Nations to reiterate the demands of his group inside Gaza. This as Israel expanded fishing zones in Gaza to 15 kilometers and continues to keep open both of Gaza's borders. These were promises made during talks last week as the sides exchanged rocket fire and airstrikes. Egyptian negotiators have worked throughout the last week to end the recent uptick in violence between the two sides. Despite their efforts, 5 more rockets were fired from Gaza into Israel early Sunday. The Israeli military responded by shelling 4 empty Hamas outposts along the Strip with tanks, despite reports that the second largest group in Gaza, Islamic Jihad, was planning a terror attack to derail ceasefire talks. Intelligence sources tell Fox News the threat level remains high but has not changed. In Jerusalem, Trey Yingst, Fox News.
Joe Biden is pushing back against comparisons of the former vice president's embrace of women during official ceremonies and an allegation he touched a Nevada Democratic candidate without invitation. Aides say specifically an image of Biden with his hands on the shoulders of Stephanie Carter, the wife of Defense Secretary Ash Carter, during his 2015 swearing-in, was misleadingly used to bolster the claim by 2014 Nevada Lieutenant Governor nominee Lucy Flores. Dueling protests in Chicago today outside the office of the prosecutors who dropped charges in the Jussie Smollett case. Fox's Jeff Manasso reports from Chicago.
Crowds of people gathering outside Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx's office, holding signs that read "The fix was in" and chanting "Fox must go."
There has to be accountability when people commit a crime. If it doesn't mean anything, then people are going to keep doing it.
Fraternal Order of Police President Kevin Graham, shortly after Jesse Jackson held a rally in support for Fox, who controversially dropped all felony counts against actor Jussie Smollett for what Chicago police describe as a hate hoax. President Trump has also called for the FBI and Department of Justice to review the case, which Fox says she welcomes. In Chicago, Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
And New Mexico pro-lifers are hoping an abortionist wants to pursue a career in medicine but not killing preborn children. Charlie Butts has more.
Leah Torres used to do abortions in Utah until she was fired. Elisa Martinez of the New Mexico Alliance for Life tells AFN Torres had been working at a Utah Planned Parenthood terminating preborn babies.
When she responded to someone inquiring about her line of work, and that created quite a bit of controversy. I think what was alleged, and I say alleged because I believe there is some legal action being taken place there, that she stated that she cuts the larynx of the fetuses before they have an opportunity to scream.
The controversy roared again when the Carlsbad Medical Center hired her to serve a residency, but the New Mexico hospital has confirmed no abortions will take place there. Martinez stresses, though, there have been strong hints that Torres wants out of the abortion business.
Imagine seeing that and participating in that numerous times. There's a lot of trauma, but that's not to say that God cannot change things around. And so that's really what we're hoping and praying for with the situation with Dr. Leah Torres, and we want to encourage her in that transition. We don't want to be an impediment to that.
Only time will tell, but there is an organization that helps medical personnel get out of the abortion business, find jobs, and obtain counseling. That's Abby Johnson's And Then There Were None. I'm Charlie Butts.
Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
I'm Will Addison, Director of Urban Family Talk. We desire to be a movement of time tellers. In 1 Chronicles 12:32 it says, "The sons of Issachar were men who had understanding of the time, to know what Israel ought to do." In these perilous times, God is raising up a people of discernment who will see, pray, and act. We sound the alarm as watchmen. We cry aloud that God's people may be activated for his service. Join the movement at urbanfamilytalk.com.
She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
It is not acceptable that when a woman goes to work or is in any kind of environment that she feels anything less than comfortable and safe. And this is an issue the entire country has got to work on.
I want to protect grand jury testimony, protect classified information,
Right.
but I want the public to see the underlying document. This has been a cloud over President Trump for 2 years. That cloud has been removed.
It's not like you're summarizing something that's really complicated. Do you have sufficient evidence upon which to charge people with conspiracy, collusion, coordination, whatever you want to call it?
I think a lot of Pelosi's poodles out there running scared of the facts, but they're still trying to chase down witch hunts. There was no collusion. Get over that fact. Nobody should have wanted it to happen anyway, but it didn't happen. And yet for 2 years they've been peddling this lie.
And now, Stacy Washington.
Welcome into the program. Thank you so much for being with us. Here in hour 2, we're going to speak to Dan Kish. He is going to join us to talk about the fishermen's lawsuit in California, where they're actually suing to say that, climate change is doing something horrible to them, but they're not doing anything to update their boats or their equipment to reflect the new technologies that are out there that would enable them to actually have a positive impact on the environment. So this lawsuit, it's really a fascinating story. Dan is the Senior VP of Policy for the American Energy Alliance, and he'll be with us in the next segment. So what I want to get to now is Trey Gowdy saying that Nancy Pelosi will have to drop Schiff from the Intelligence Committee. Now, if you missed it, we had every Republican on the Intelligence Committee say that they've lost confidence in Schiff because of his statements and comments about the president and the fact that the intel community might say, because he's denying the results of the Mueller investigation, that they don't want to share information with him. And also he's leaky. He shares stuff that he's told that should be classified and should be held close to the vest. And he's just, always running around talking about what he knows. And so they don't have confidence in him any longer. And I think it's interesting because, obviously Nancy Pelosi would never go against him unless it became politically expedient to do so, like if the intelligence community stopped sharing with him. So let's listen to this. It's number 2.
It's hard to get on the House Intelligence Committee, at least on the Republican side. Paul and Kevin don't pick members of the bomb-throwing caucus or the crazy caucus. I mean, you've got Elise Stefanik, who's a national security expert, Mike Conaway, former chairman of ethics, Will Hurd, who was a CIA employee,
Yep.
Johnny Radcliffe, a U.S. attorney, terrorism expert. I mean, these are not members of the bomb-throwing caucus. And for them to say, Adam Schiff, we have lost confidence in your leadership, I'll tell you, I think what's going to happen next, Dana, is the intelligence community is going to say, you know what, Adam, you disregard the information that you're provided. You prejudge the outcome of investigations. You have the president not just indicted, but in jail. We're going to stop sharing information with you. If you are the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and you can't act in a reasonable way, we're going to stop sharing information with you, in which case Pelosi will have no choice but to replace Schiff. And look, the next in line is Jim Himes, who's every bit as progressive. He's just a lot more reasonable than Adam Schiff is.
And so it's not that Trey Gowdy or any other Republicans are advocating for a Republican to be in charge of the committee. The Republicans don't control the House any longer. The Democrats do. So obviously the House Intelligence Committee is going to be chaired by a Democrat. But it should be someone who has the confidence of everyone on the committee for their integrity, whether or not they agree on politics. Obviously, they won't. They're on opposite sides of the political aisle. I thought he made a great point about how people are really it's one thing to say you don't trust the process and say that from day one. And then when the results come out, you say, see, I told you I didn't trust this process. But Schiff has been one of the primary individuals out there just beating the drum of, Mueller is an honorable man. Mueller is liked by both sides of the political aisle. Mueller is to be respected. We need to protect him. We need to make sure that he can complete his investigation. We need to wait for his report to come out. And now that the report is out, he's like, we don't trust it. We don't believe it. Ain't none of that true. He's starting to go down roads that should be unthinkable for him in light of his past statements and comments. And so it's interesting. We have to see what Nancy Pelosi will do. I want to also point everybody over to urbanfamilytalk.com and afr.net, and you can find great information over there, including about the Marriage and Family Conference, which is coming up at the end of June. You can register there, so don't forget to go on and put in your registration so that you can experience the fantastic conference that's coming up. in the month of June. And I'm not sure, I'm not sure, but I think that Miki Addison and I are putting on the parenting panel that we did last year. And there will be handouts and wonderful conversation there. And then we did a question and answer session during that as well. It was a really good panel. And I always enjoy getting to do anything that I can with the one Miki Addison. So right now, I want to pivot over to how Venezuela uses universal health care as a political tool. Now, we talked last hour about how private property is being called racist, and this is an all-out assault. If you look at, remember we had Kira Davis on the program last week, or the week before, actually, and she was talking about this new SICAS kind of created program for sex ed that introduces toddlers to very, very adult sexual content, and they want to demystify it and make it normative for toddlers and 5-year-olds and 8-year-olds to know everything about all of these different sex acts, so that parents can't mold their kids and shape them through the teaching and memorization of the Bible, or simply passing on their own morals and values. So that's an assault on not just parenthood and the right to parent your child and pass on your views, but it's an assault on the children of this country. There's also an assault on the ideas that all of us it's like, it's so basic to us that we know we can own property. You can own a car, you can own a house, you can own multiple houses, you can own businesses. It's so intrinsic to us that we don't even consider the idea that those things not only might be racist, but wrong, and that the government should change and take those rights away from us. I liken it to when you look at what's going on overseas in Europe, where they don't have the right to own a firearm. They can own firearms, but under conditions set by the government. And if the government changes and says you can't own firearms unless these, 100 items are met, they just have to deal with it. Here in America, we own the firearms, and we have a right to own them and carry them and use them. If the government decides to infringe on that, we can petition, not just the government, but we could go to court. We can fight all the way to the Supreme Court to ensure that our constitutional right is not infringed upon. Totally different scenario, right? I mean, just think about that for a second. In one location, you don't have the right to self-defense. In the other location, you not only have the right to defend yourself, but you have the right to own a myriad of different types of weapons, and there is no limit to how many of them you can own. And you can use them for hunting, or, sport. You can be a sport shooter, or you can just buy guns and own them to protect yourself. You don't have to own them. You don't have to buy them, and you don't have to subsidize other people owning and buying them. But if you want to, you can, and the government can't stop you unless you're a criminal. You see? So that it's a different mindset. What Democrats are attempting to do is bring that mindset from over there. And y'all know how much I love me some Europe. Y'all know I grew up in Germany. I enjoy Europe on a level that, I feel like it's a God's gift. When you get over there and see all the old buildings and you hear the people speaking the different languages, and you see how much older their country is than ours, and how it's just so different. It's like it makes you appreciate America even more. That's how I feel. When I go there, I love it so much. But then when I get back, I really appreciate our country. It's wonderful. Europe is a beautiful place, and it's so different from country to country to country. Oh, and the other thing that's really different about it is that each of those little state-sized countries, it's the whole country is the size of one of our states. So it brings you down. In America, everything is so big in comparison. It draws you down into this smaller environment. And then you see the differences in these tiny little countries from region to region, and it's just amazing. That being said, I would much rather American citizenship is so much better to have than, say, German citizenship or citizenship in Great Britain, because I have rights here that you just don't have those rights in these other countries. Now, does that mean I couldn't live in Germany? Of course not. I grew up there. I could definitely live in Great Britain. Of course I could. But they are actually prosecuted and persecuted for thinking incorrectly. In Great Britain, they'll actually bring charges against you as a homeowner, as a person, if you keep a bat or a knife by the bed because your neighborhood or your little town or hamlet has been broken into a lot, there's a lot of robberies going on, and so you put a knife by the bed to defend yourself because you can't have a gun there, then the robber comes in and he's beating the stuffing out of one of your kids, and you pick the knife up from next to your bed when he comes towards you and you defend yourself, they can actually sue you, and you have to take care of the robber that you stabbed because they say you premeditated defending yourself. Have you ever heard anything so ludicrous? This happens over and over and over again there. They also go after people for stuff that they say on Twitter. Woe be it for me to be a citizen of Great Britain. Things you say on Twitter that you express a disbelief in, transgenderism is mental illness. You put that on Twitter, they can come to your house and arrest you and put you in jail for that. So that is why it is so important for us not to adopt their ideas. We can love the people there. We can enjoy their beautiful country and their castles and all that cool stuff they got going on. But we don't have to bring their ideas over here because their ideas don't work for us. We don't have a populace that's willing to bow down to things that nincompoops wrote on a piece of paper because they didn't like something someone put on Twitter. I don't know anybody who wants to do that. Even liberals who are into thought control don't want you mining their Facebook and their Twitter and then coming and prosecuting them for things that because they're just as offensive, if not more, than anything you would find from someone who's on the right and is tweeting or expressing themselves. So here we are. We've got this universal health care thing that the Democrats are pushing. And Venezuela already has it. They're a full socialist country. And Maduro is actually using the universal health care to force people to vote for him so he can stay in power because he's a dictator, right? What do you get with socialism? Dictators. So here it is. It's number 3.
The New York Times reports that doctors were instructed to hoard medical supplies and give people minimal care in the lead up to the 2018 election. Why? So they could release the supplies days before the election to trick voters into thinking that Maduro had fixed the shortages. And when they did offer medical supplies, they made it clear that you wouldn't get any if you didn't vote for the government. Maduro seems to think that a shortage of medical supplies is in his interest, and so he's blocking supplies in a lot more obvious ways too. When countries from around the world sent aid, his soldiers stopped it at the border and watched it burn to the ground. This is what can happen when the government owns the healthcare system. And it doesn't just happen in Venezuela. The British government has repeatedly withheld medical care from infants because it thinks it knows better than their parents. Do you remember Charlie Gard? He died in hospice care because a judge ordered that he be taken off life support, even as the United States had offered to take him in. And then there was Alfie Evans, where the UK Supreme Court itself ruled that the parents had no right to pursue further treatment for their son, even as Italy had granted the boy citizenship and had a medical transport standing by. This is what happens when medical decisions are taken away from patients and given to the government. Both the UK and Maduro agree. Patients and parents are stupid and can't be trusted to choose what is best for themselves or their children. Instead, cede control to the government. They have your best interests at heart.
Can you imagine? You got your kid, your baby, who obviously has something very physically wrong with them, and you know that without further intervention, your child is going to die prematurely. Your child is not going to grow up and be an adult. And you know that the chances are slim. But you believe that if your child is given experimental medical assistance, that child can actually, that you want to take the possibility, because why let your child die without trying? You found people who will do the surgery. It's not going to cost your government anything. It's not going to cost you. But the Brits wouldn't let it happen because they knew if they did, it would highlight how horrible their medical care is because they have, dun, 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 single payer. So they'd rather see the baby die than prove that they're wrong about the way they do their health insurance. And Maduro uses it for an even more sinister purpose. That's pretty sinister if you get my meaning there. It's really sinister to say, did you vote for me? No? You ain't getting no, asthma medication. You can just go ahead and have an asthma attack and bite it because you didn't vote for me. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine being told as a parent you can't take your child out of the hospital because your government said you can't? Their ideas don't work for us. We can't let them bring those here. When we get back, we'll have Dan Kish. Stay right there.
I wanted to have the abortion because I was trying to hide the situation.
When a young mom in crisis walks into a preborn pregnancy center, she's welcomed with open arms and given love, support, and a free ultrasound to meet her unborn baby. This young woman not only chose life for her baby, but heard the message of Jesus Christ and was comforted from the guilt and pain that plagued her. Preborn centers lead the nation in providing free ultrasounds. When an abortion-minded woman sees her baby on ultrasound, she's 80% more likely to choose life for her baby. For $140, you can sponsor 5 ultrasounds, and 100% of your sponsorship goes towards saving babies. To find out more, go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com, or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. Your love can save a life.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Here we go again. This time the San Antonio City Council banned Chick-fil-A from serving food at the San Antonio airport. If this sounds familiar, the same thing happened about 4 years ago at the Denver airport. Taking a stand for traditional marriage can get you banned by progressive council members. That was the issue in Denver. But the ban in San Antonio added another twist. The council members also took issue with the fact that Chick-fil-A gives contributions to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, which has a statement of faith based on a biblical perspective about human sexuality. As I explained back in 2015, the Denver City Council backed down because Denver attorneys warned that barring a business on the basis of political prejudice could result in a First Amendment lawsuit they would most likely lose. We'll have to see what happens in the next few weeks in San Antonio. The ironies here are significant. One councilman said everyone has a place here and everyone should feel welcome when they walk through our airport. But it doesn't seem like Chick-fil-A or other similar businesses are welcome. A representative of the company said this is the first they heard about this when they read the press release from the councilman. The representative reminded him and anyone else that everyone is and should feel welcome at Chick-fil-A. We have a fundamental code of conduct at Chick-fil-A. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. They serve more than 140,000 people on a daily basis without regard to race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or gender identity. A bill in the Texas legislature is being debated that would ensure that the government cannot punish religious groups, businesses, counselors, wedding vendors, or others for their sincerely held religious beliefs. That is one remedy to blatant viewpoint discrimination. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Socialism, go to viewpoints.info/socialism. That's viewpoints.info/socialism.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the program. Head over to stacyontheright.com and hit the subscribe button. Also find out more at Stacy on the Right on Twitter and Instagram. And don't forget to go see the movie Unplanned. I've already been to see it with my husband. We're planning on taking the kids. The movie did blockbuster type action over the weekend, in spite of the fact that Twitter shut down the Twitter feed of the movie and tons of other really just oppressive, unfair type actions on their social media. They're still doing a fantastic job. And the movie it had a great opening weekend. And so I encourage you to go see it. It's hard, it's difficult, but we can do hard and difficult things. We are not snowflakes or pansies or, any of that stuff. You can handle it. Go see it. Unplannedfilm.com to find out more about the movie. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Dan Kish. He's the Senior VP of Policy for the American Energy Alliance. Dan, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Stacy. Thanks for having me.
So I read the story on my email. I was thinking to myself, is this real? Like, how? And so first, tell the listeners what the story is, what's going on with these fishermen and the environmental action they want to take.
Right. Well, I think, most folks have at least heard of some of the lawsuits that have been filed. There's been a group of kids that someone has paid for to file lawsuits against oil companies and energy companies in general. And across the country, and cities have been filing. I think Baltimore filed, Oakland filed, San Francisco's filed. And the whole idea is they're going to sue for billions and billions of dollars because these companies cause climate change. That's their argument. And the courts have been throwing them out, and the latest one was a group of fishermen, and I'm going to put it in quotations because there are some fishermen involved, but it's actually more of an environmental group that calls itself Fishermen that's located out in San Francisco. And their argument is that they won't have any fish as a result of global warming, and therefore these companies should pay them billions of dollars, which means you and me and anybody who uses fuel, which is just about all of us, are going to have to pay these folks. And it just turns out the same law firm is representing each of the plaintiffs, and they stand to make about a third of the money themselves, and it's quite an operation. And it seems, if you're just reading the newspaper, as though it's just kind of innocent. People are out objecting to things, but when you peel it back, you find out these are very they're not transparent. There's a lot more going on than meets the eye, as we so often see in these big national issues.
Okay, so it just makes you tired thinking about it, Dan, to be honest with you. You know, you're sitting, I mean, this is how you feel when, and I'm not trying to throw kids under the bus, but parents will understand this analogy. When maybe you've been out all day long with your kids and they've just gotten everything they could have possibly wanted. You haven't said no all day, and then you get home and they come and start peppering you with a bunch of requests, and it's like outlandish stuff. And you're like, aren't you tired yet? And the kid is just still pounding you, and you're thinking, man, I did something wrong today. I should have said no a couple times. Only these people, these fishermen, they're not kids. They're not cute. They're not lovable. They don't deserve, a second chance or a third chance. They're grifters. What you're talking about sounds to me like they just said, who can we lift millions of dollars off of? Oh, the fishing industry. And they don't even have anything to support their assertions, because we all know that climate change is just wealth redistribution. They don't even know whether it's global warming or cooling or ice age, or we're all going to melt at 1,000 degrees like volcanic temperatures. They don't even know what they think is going to happen to us. 12 years is what AOC says we have left. That's it.
Yeah. Well, Stacy, you ever go fishing?
Oh, yeah.
Some days you go out there and the fish are there, some days they aren't. I guess I could say when they aren't there, it's global warming. You used to say that, it's the rain or lack of rain or something like that. But, and there are times when we have good fishing crops and other times when they aren't running. That's just the nature of the beast. That's part of the fun.
That's where the phrase "the fish aren't biting" comes from. When people say the fish aren't biting, that no one made that up. That's real. You go out there on a perfect day, and the water is still and calm, and no one's making noise, and you have the best bait, and none of them bite. And then you go out another day, and it's raining and drizzling, and there's some construction going on the side of the river, and you're like, "What's happening here?" You decide to fish anyway, and they're just biting like crazy, and you catch a whole haul. You don't know what they're going to do, but they're there, and they will eventually bite something.
Exactly, and that's kind of the nature of the beast. That's the way the good Lord made it, and we're just going to have to live with it. And all of these things are just machinations. Like I say, if it's the same law firm that is associated with these environmental groups that is suing on behalf of each of these organizations, after a while, I'm not the brightest bulb on the porch, but after a while, you kind of come to the conclusion that, hey, something's going on here, and it's not just homegrown. This is part of a movement. It's part of community organizing, if you will. It's part of this whole idea that somehow that has led us to the sort of crazy things that we've heard about lately, about the Green New Deal and doing away with cows and no more airplanes or cars or anything else. And that's what's feeding it. And I'm reminded when you were talking about how tired you can be at the end of the day with the kids. You know what they've got that makes us so tired? They get a lot of energy. Mm-hmm. And Americans love energy. I mean, we have energy drinks. We drink coffee. You ever go to the doctor and say, gee, doc, I've got too much energy?
Never.
People generally say, I don't have enough. And as Americans, we always want more energy to do things, hopefully to do good things. And, the good Lord blessed us with this enormous amount of homegrown energy that we're now seeing come to fruition. Now that the government's out of the way, we're the number one producer of oil and gas in the world. We invented nuclear. We have the largest supplies of coal in the world. We're sitting on top of an energy bonanza, and yet some people don't want us to use it because I guess they fear what will happen as a consequence of our being energetic.
Well, I think, Dan, the other thing is people are really convinced that the earth is, the entire earth can be saved by Americans, and we can change the climate on the entire earth by making some drastic decisions here at home. But it's fun to talk about, isn't it? Haven't we all been there? You know what I would do? I would blah, 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 blah. And so they get into this rut of saying, well, we just need to cut out planes, cut out this, cut out that. But then when you look at the way they live, I flew to Anaheim, California, and we had to catch 2 planes on the way there, and then we had to catch a couple planes on the way back. And I'm pretty sure I wasn't on a plane full of Republicans on the way there and a plane full of Republicans on the way back. I'm pretty sure that the bigger plane we flew on probably was 50% or more people who are Democrats. They were not on there like forced, gagged, bound, and thrown into the seats and strapped in and forced to fly on the planes. They chose to fly. They bought the tickets. And if I'd said, all of y'all need to drive to California, they'd have said, and who are you? How can you make us do anything we don't want to do? We're going to fly. So the idea that they would have to live under the same things that they're trying to force down our throats is anathema to them. They don't ever plan to live under these conditions, which means they don't really believe this stuff, which means there's something else that they're up to. And you've pointed it out here. You're highlighting it. These fisher people, they're environmentalists really, and they're not fixing their boats and stuff. They're not actually walking the walk themselves. So clearly they don't believe in it. They just want money from, people who have some.
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, the reporter who penned the story that we're talking about has tried to contact this organization to ask them whether their people have retrofitted their boats to be sailboats, and because fishing takes, anytime you're moving a relatively large ship, it takes a lot of fuel, and that's fossil fuel or organic fuel, as I more appropriately refer to it. It's the stuff that God gave us, and again, we're blessed to have it, and they use enormous amounts in order to fish, to farm. All of agriculture of every type takes lots of fuel, and as a consequence, when he asked them, they simply didn't get back to him. They have not gotten back to him with any of the questions about the affiliations of the law firm or the fact that they all seem to be, it seems like musical chairs. They're head of one group and then head of another group and then go to the law firm and then they go to work for a congressman who wants to sue the companies. And it's just the typical sort of Washington morass that we see so often in an attempt to try to basically pull the wool over people's eyes.
And then when some of us refuse to have the wool pulled over, when some of us are like, when you're trying to wash a baby's face and the baby starts fighting you, and they're amazing at not getting their faces washed. They will lean their head from one side to the other, and then they'll kind of rhythmically move their head. So you literally can't get the face cloth onto their face. And finally, after like 6 or 7 minutes of struggling, you figure out a way to wash the baby's face, and then they're mad. Their face is clean, but they're mad. That's how we are. They're like, let me pull this wool over your eyes. And we start, moving around. We're like, we can see the truth. We're not going to have it. And we're getting angry. We're getting angrier and angrier because they're trying to take money from us. Because that's what this is. It's every part of the environmentalist agenda removes money from people who have it and gives it to people who, like, they literally set it on fire and burn it. They don't do anything good with it. And it lessens our economic growth. It just stunts everything near it. And we see that in places where they've already, look at California, look at the way they used to be, and now look at how they are now with the wildfires and everything, and they don't want to accept responsibility for any of what they have wrought on themselves.
Well, that's right. I mean, if you want to have a clean environment, the best way to do that is to build well, to use resources to benefit people's lives. When people aren't hungry, they don't destroy things. I mean, if you want to see wealth destruction, you look at a place like Venezuela, where they have some of the largest supplies of oil in the world, but they unfortunately have a socialist government where people boss other people around, tell them what to do, and nothing works, and you can't even buy food. And as a consequence, people end up eating the zoo animals. And the same thing happens in countries that are poor that haven't been able to lift their way out. And frankly, we owe an obligation to a lot of parts of the rest of the world where people haven't been able to climb out of abject poverty to make their lives better, and denying them energy is the worst possible thing that we could do. So that's what's so kind of perverse about a lot of this talk about energy. We're finally in a position where we are where we wanted to be for 5 or 6 decades, almost wholly independent and doing better all the time, and it's providing lots of jobs, and all of a sudden people want to wreck it. Makes no sense.
It doesn't. It's almost like they're living in a place where there's a lot of economic prosperity and opportunity, and they're trying to tear it down and turn it to a place like Venezuela. Why would they do that?
Isn't that strange?
It's weird.
I bet you they really don't go fishing that much.
Oh, so my granddad used to say the smartest people fish.
Yep.
And I was like, I don't really like fishing. He was like, well, you will. And he took us fishing. And then my dad, when he heard that my granddad had taken us fishing over the summer when we were back in the States for the summer, and my granddad had taken us out on the boat and was fishing, he was like, well, I haven't been taking y'all because you said you don't like fishing, but you went fishing with your granddad, so you're going to go fishing with me. So then we went fishing with him. And I never really enjoyed it, but I went a ton. And my sister, oh my goodness, she was so good at hooking all those disgusting little things onto she'd hook the bait, and she would hook all the baits up, and we'd have more than one line in the water. And then when we catch them, she would hold it up, get her picture, then she would immediately take it off the hook, throw it in a bucket, and then later she would be with my dad, they're gutting and cleaning the fish. She'd be over there just with gusto going after it, and I just helped. I would help because I could not stand the cutting and the cleaning out of the fish, but I loved eating them. So I would proudly stand by, and I caught those. Those are the ones I caught, and my mom would cook them, and I'd help cook them. But I was definitely there, and it's actually not easy. Fishing is not easy to do if you want to catch anything. And it's something that you do if you have patience, you can do it. And also you do have to you have to be smart enough to do it. Like it's not something a nincompoop can do. You have to actually have some intelligence to do it. It's just amazing to me that they'll leave no stone unturned. These environmentalists are like, you know what? We're not doing anything to the fishing industry. Let's get on them and get some of their money.
Oh, yeah. And there are people more than willing to jump in who kind of use fishing as a front for political policies. And unfortunately, that's what's happening here. There are many big fishing organizations that I've worked with over the years in a previous career, and I am quite familiar with them, and they do represent people who commercially fish, and they don't do these sorts of things. These, unfortunately, are put together. They make it sound like all fishermen are suing energy companies that make the fuel possible for their boats. And when you think that through, it just doesn't make sense.
It's just ludicrous. But I'm so glad that you're on with us today to explain this. So when you listeners, when you see this story in the news, now you have the backstory. Now you understand what's going on. And I've just been saying all this whole program today that we have to push back against this stuff. First of all, we get informed, which is what you've done today, and you've helped us a great deal in unpacking this. Then you have to basically be willing to say the truth to other people when they say, oh, have you heard what the fishing industry is? Nah, I already know about that. That's not true. And shut it down. Give that person the information. Dan Kish, Senior VP of Policy at the American Energy Alliance. Thank you for your time today.
Oh, thank you, Stacy. It was a pleasure.
Good to talk to you. We'll talk to you again soon. All right, so I hear the music. We'll be back with more after this. You got to keep it here, though. We'll be back with more Stacy on the Right after these messages.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, geologist and president of the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, how long does it take to make oil?
Chris, oil is the altered remains of organic molecules. These are primarily hydrogen and carbon, and after death they can metamorphose into hydrocarbon oil. It doesn't take long. In fact, there are a number of ways to rapidly convert organic material into oil, but all of them are rather expensive and inefficient. However, if water is injected into the organic material, then the process is much more efficient and quick. This reminds me of the great flood of Noah's day, when excessive heat and pressures combined with lots of waters to act on the abundant living things which were destroyed by the flood. Chris, it all fits. Even the difficult questions like the origin of oil can best be answered from a back to Genesis perspective.
To learn more about creation, get our free DVD called That's a Fact. Call us at 800-628-7640 and mention the promo code FACT.
Abraham Hamilton III.
God put us in this world at this time to be salt and light. We don't fold because of the darkness that we're facing. This is not the first time in the world's history that it's gotten dark. God has called you and I to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment.
Tune in to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays at 5 p.m. Central on Urban Family Talk.
If your primary identity is in Jesus Christ, then you don't care whether your family likes it, you don't care whether black folks like it, or white folks like it, or Democrats like it, or Republicans like it, or independents like it.
It's Jesus.
You don't care who likes it, you're going to line yourself up with the Word of God and what Jesus Christ requires of you.
Urban Family Talk with Bishop E.W. Jackson and The Awakening, weekday mornings at 9 Central. It's about Jesus.
Jesus.
This is Poll Parade with Fox News Director of Polling, Dana Blanton.
For up to 20, there are at least 20 announced and potential Democratic candidates running for president. Sounds like a March Madness bracket, right? If it were, the number one seeds would be Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. Among Democratic primary voters, our Fox News poll finds Biden as the top choice at 31%. Sanders gets 23%. Kamala Harris and Beto O'Rourke receive 8% apiece. Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren each garner 4%. The remaining candidates are the political equivalent of a 16th seed, 2% or less. How are Democrats deciding? 51% say they're more likely to support a candidate they think can beat President Trump. About a third prioritize voting for a candidate they like, regardless of electability. So far, 11% of Democrats are unsure of their picks. That makes sense. The roster isn't set yet, and the first game, aka voting, is still 10 months away. So stay tuned. I'm Dana Blanton, and that's your Poll Parade.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
We are often pressured to keep our mouths shut about anything. We, as party loyalists, as party stalwarts, as our foot soldiers for the party, we are expected to quote unquote keep our dirty laundry to ourselves, and it's always in service to the party. And in this case, there are so many more incredible candidates that are just as likely and I believe are competent and amazing and can beat Donald Trump. And so I did feel like I felt a little less pressure in terms of feeling like I could speak out because we have options. We have options, and I don't feel pressured to stay quiet and just take one for the team the way in which we're always asked to do and never speak out about the things that we believe are wrong.
Wow. So that's Lucy Flores. She's a Democrat. She's not coming over to our side. This isn't about her not believing in progressive policies or ideals. It's about her basically saying women on the Democratic side aren't allowed to complain. You're not allowed to say, he touched me, he did this, he did that. It was inappropriate, this or that, because they're all about getting power. Isn't it amazing to hear her say that from her perch in politics, where she served at the state level? She ran at the state level. She expected to become the lieutenant governor, I believe it was, of her state. And this happened to her, and she never said a word about how uncomfortable it made her feel because she knew she wouldn't be listened to. And right now you've got Bernie Sanders. He said if there's only one allegation, it's not really disqualifying for him. Now, one allegation is disqualifying for a Republican, but if you're a Democrat, well, one allegation really isn't enough. Now, who here thinks one allegation is all we're dealing with Joe Biden? I want to give a caveat here before I go any further. I'm not of the belief that Joe Biden is the same type of sexual predator that Bill Clinton was. No one has accused Joe Biden of raping them or going any further than what you've seen in public, which is him just being really handsy and condescending and touchy-feely with women. It's inappropriate. I don't excuse it at all. But I also wonder where these women's husbands were. And I get it. He was the vice president. He was a senator at the time. He was a man of power. But how long does a man have to have his hands on your daughter's shoulder and be standing right behind her before you as the father step in and say, hey, let me go ahead and stand behind her. Let me help my daughter out. It's like a never ending stream. Every time I turn to Twitter on my desktop here, if you go anywhere where people are tweeting about Joe Biden, they're just live video of him grabbing women by their chin, leaning in, kissing people on the lips where their husband is literally the husband is shoulder to shoulder with the wife and Joe Biden kisses the wife on the lips. We're not talking about pictures where people are standing close to each other and it's a picture. We're talking about live video of him inappropriately. He says he appreciates women and he comforts them and he's always trying to find ways to show his affection towards them. So whether it's coming from a place of malice or not, the effect is still the same on the people who were, the recipients of the good feelings, if you will. And it's a problem for him now because poll numbers are not important to the Democrats. They don't sit up in the war room and say, Joe Biden's polling ahead. Perhaps we should circle the wagons around him. No, they're like, you know what? He's too moderate. And he's a hardcore progressive, by the way. The Democrats have literally allowed their party to drift so far to the left that a hardcore progressive like Joe Biden is now problematic for them. And they don't want him also because of the other thing. And you know what it is. I'm going to have to say it too. I hope no one is going to get offended. I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. You've been prepared. He's an old white guy. Now, you guys know I have no problem with old anything. I don't have that problem. If you're the most qualified tool for the job, I want you in that job. That's it for me. You don't have to be a woman. You don't have to be black. You don't have to be Hopi and changey. If you're the best tool for the job, I'm like, get in there. I want to vote for the person who holds the same ideals that I hold from the Christian worldview. And if you're the best one for it, then, and you're a man and you happen to be permanently untanned, then go head on and get in there. You know what I'm saying? Just get in there. That's who we're voting for. If you happen to be black and you're the best person for the job, then of course, get in there. It's not respecter of persons, not at all. Unless you happen to be well qualified, but also pro-abortion, or well qualified, but you don't believe in religious liberty, well qualified, you're against the Constitution, well qualified, but you think that Christian beliefs are outdated and bigoted and yada, yada, yada. We're done. You're not the best tool for the job. You're not the most qualified because you hold beliefs that are antithetical to me practicing my faith as an American. That's where it's supposed to be anyway. So it's just fascinating to hear this woman, after all these years, after Me Too, after Time's Up, she comes out and says, you can't actually report anything to the Democrats because all they care about is supporting whoever's going to win. Wow. Imagine the news people, their heads would be spinning like tops if someone who was a Republican made that kind of a statement about elected Republicans. Just imagine. Oh, they'd be gleefully lapping that up. We wouldn't be able to understand the words that were coming out of their mouths. They'd be salivating so hard. So then you've got the CNN contributor. So I'm going to call out a couple things before you listen to this. First of all, listen to the way she's talking. Listen to the way this woman is talking. She's a CNN contributor. And she says Joe Biden should quit while he's ahead. It's not his time. Now, not his time is code for your time is over. He's had his moment in the sun because he was Barack Obama's best friend. So anything beyond that, and the Democrats are like, we're not for you. We're for Kamala Harris. We want another diverse candidate. We want to be able to gin up the Republicans as racist. We want to be able to say they're misogynists and bigots. We need a woman. She needs to be of color, and she needs to be a hardcore progressive who would smash you like a bug if you say anything against abortion. And that they found that person in Kamala Harris. Never mind that moderates and Republicans don't really love her. And her voice when she's questioning, all those clips of her on the Senate, I think Senate Judiciary Panel. Senate Judiciary Panel, where she's questioning witnesses, people who are about to be appointed to something, or her questioning of Judge Kavanaugh. That voice she uses. Imagine having that voice for 4 years. I can't, people. I just can't. There has to be a limit to what we're made to put up with, right? I guess maybe not. But that's the way I feel. There has to be a limit, and she is the limit. She's over the limit. She cannot be the president. So here is the CNN contributor. Just check out how she's talking and wagging her little teeth here in this clip. It's number 5.
No one is making a criminal allegation, but the context of it, to my mind, is that the Democratic Party is animated right now by women. And the context is Joe Biden's career of paternalistic attitudes and policies towards women in the guise of protecting them that he has, even now into his 70s, not interrogated. Now, there may be people who are thrilled to have Joe Biden be affectionate towards them. That's great. But making the assumption that somebody who is a political colleague of yours wants your hands on them means that you have not thought about how the other person feels about this. And saying things like, oh, Anita Hill, I wish I could have done something, when you were the chairman of the committee, speaking about women seeking abortions as if you're their father and you want them to not be scared and abortion is always wrong. Trafficking in racial backlash policies. To me, if I were close to Joe Biden, and I think he has a long career of public service to be proud of, but if I were close to him, I would say, Joe, quit while you're ahead. It's not your time.
So you need to know that some emails flew around, and she didn't come up with that phrase there at the end on her own. She is a mouthpiece for Democrats in power, and when they don't want you to run for something and they send a CNN contributor, someone paid by CNN, it means she does multiple hits a day. At minimum, she does multiple hits a week. She has a dependable schedule on CNN. She comes on and says he's trafficking in racially insensitive, like what was that word salad she came up with? She didn't support any of that with any documentation. She didn't say when he said blah, 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 that was racially blah. No, she doesn't have to. She's not there to provide documentation or receipts of anything that he's done. She's there to give him a message straight on CNN. She not only gives it to him, she gives it to whoever's watching the show, whoever's listening to it, anybody who takes the clip and turns it into audio for their own show, and people who hear that. What she's doing is she's setting the table. She's letting him know, this is the table as it's set. There's no place for you here. So if you show up to this party, you're not going to have a place to sit down. And not having a place to sit down at the presidential race means they're going to use the superdelegates that they've kept in their back pocket. Yeah, they eliminated the original system, but they still have some superdelegates to rig the election if they need to. Those are going to be rigged against Joe Biden. She's telling him the fundraising's not going to be there for you. You can raise money. Of course you can. You were the vice president of the United States. But when it comes to the DNC dollars and the network of, funneling money to you and the bundlers and all that, you won't have access to that because as you look at this table here, Joe, there's no place setting for you. See the name tags? Your name's not on the name tags. So we have to let Bernie Sanders sit here because of what happened last time, but he's not going to win either. Not if they have anything to do with it. They want Kamala Harris. And so, expect the pennies to start dropping. Expect more people to start coming forward and talking about how he's not the right guy. He did this. He sniffed my hair. He kissed me on the cheek. They'll have video evidence. They're going to try to convince him not to run because he will suck the wind out of a lot of those other campaigns. Like Elizabeth Warren, she's down at 4%. You heard the poll Paris there right before we came back from the break. She's pulling down at 4%. But what they want to do is they want Joe Biden not to announce he's running. If he doesn't announce, watch how the dominoes fall. The 30% of voters who want Joe Biden will have to find someplace else to put their support. If you're for Joe Biden, you're more than likely not going to shift your support to Bernie Sanders because you're someone who's a little more mainstream. So then you'll have Kamala Harris begin to make some very mainstream statements. She'll stop talking about smoking marijuana. She'll stop trying to sound down for the cause for a whole bunch of things that moderate, normal adults don't like, not cool. She'll begin to sound very academic and very serious. She'll begin to talk about things like she's a moderate. She'll begin to embrace the kinds of mainstream ideas that Barack Obama embraced as he was running for the presidency. Now remember, he wasn't mainstream or moderate at all. He just pretended to be until he got reelected, and then he evolved on marriage. Then he reinforced his previous statements on abortion, above my pay grade, yada, yada, yada. He is an example of what we will see from Kamala Harris. And why is that? It's not just because we know how the game is played. Kamala Harris is handpicked and chosen by the Obamas. Both of them support her. Michelle will mobilize her now. It's like a legion of people who bought that book and paid, some of them $1,200 for a ticket to get in a stadium and listen to her talk about the book and, you know, kind of do the Shaquille O'Neal shimmy with her shoulders, wear a yellow outfit, kind of walk around stage slow, say a few cool things, criticize President Trump, criticize Melania Trump. They ate it up. They just loved it. They paid for those tickets and they were like, yes, yes, queen. And she just took their money and did the little routine. And now she's off counting her dollars, and everybody else, you just have a book and you had an experience. Nothing to help you change your life. Nothing life-changing like the name of Jesus. Nothing where you could actually take it with you, and a month from now you can say, wow, I'm different. Wow, she showed me how to look at the scriptures in a way that made me really understand God is for me. God has something for me. No, you're not going to get anything like that from Michelle Obama. You're going to get that she's wearing the latest outfit that you couldn't afford a part of the outfit. You couldn't afford the belt on that outfit, but you shelled out $600 to go sit with her. That's what the tickets were going for, $600, $1,200. The scalpers had a field day to get in a stadium where she literally is a yellow dot on the stage. You're so far away. And you get to hear her through the microphone, of course. And that's what concerts and these, experiences are. Let's not play like this is something she's the only one who's done. But it's just fascinating. She's parlayed her first ladyhood into this enormously successful book that you hadn't learned jackola about improving yourself or your life or fixing your heart for eternity. None of that. Just a bunch of hero worship for Michelle Obama. And now you're plugged in and set up because you've given your email address and all that for her to bombard you with all of the reasons why Kamala Harris should be the next president. And you're such a dunderhead. You already bought into her garbage. You ate up all the crapola she was putting down. Now you're going to do the same thing for Kamala Harris. Knowing good and well, Kamala Harris, she's not going to smoke weed with you. She's never going to meet you. She's never going to know you. You're never going to be anything to her, just like you're never going to be anything to Michelle Obama, except somebody who was, silly enough to shell out $30 for the book, whatever it was, $20, $30. And you're a part of this army of people who likes to tweet about how you spent an afternoon with Michelle. And let's not play. I did that. I tweeted out that I spent an afternoon with Tucker Carlson when he came to town, but I am not deluded enough to think that he and I are friends just because that happened. And if Tucker Carlson were to ever say anything that went against my core biblical beliefs, I'd drop him like a hot rock. I'd never mention that I ever met him again because I don't worship him the way some of these people are worshiping Michelle Obama after they got done worshiping her husband when he was the president. Give your worship to the one who made it all, or you're going to get what you're asking for. Hands off. I don't want to be you at that point, all right? Have a fantastic evening. God bless you from the heartland. We'll have more Stacy on the right here on AFR and Urban Family Talk tomorrow. Until then.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of Urban Family Talk, Urban Family Communications, or American Family Association.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
Hey, I'm Miki, co-host of Aaron the